All right, what's up, everybody? We are jumping back in for another NBA slate today. Had a little bit of a rough start yesterday with the Charlotte team total that I took, but man, they just could not put it together offensively. And I won't spend a lot of time on this, but one of the things I'm starting to notice in the NBA and want to pay attention to is Charlotte's a great example where they had a few guys out because of COVID and were just destroying things offensively. But now, as they've had guys coming back, good players, Rozier and Ball and stuff, but they actually have done not quite as well on offense. And I think we might see that with some of these teams as they try to reintegrate players who are coming back off a break. So we'll pay attention, try to keep growing with what's happening in the NBA and make some good picks here. So we got 5 games today we're going to jump into, and the first one is the Pacers and the Heat playing in Miami. So PJ Tucker is going to be out today. It looks like Tyler Hero might play. He's moved from a game time decision to probable. So that certainly helps the Heat offensively, where they've struggled a little bit, but actually done kind of okay here recently without their guys in. Indiana, on the other hand, they have not been scoring the ball very well. In their last 5 away from home, they've had 99, 198. They had a couple before that, but it was a long time ago. So they've really just been scoring around 100 points in their last few away from home here, just lower scoring games overall. They're only 6-8 against the spread away from home. 1-1 on 2 or 3 days of rest. So no great trends for them there. No big trends for Miami. So a couple key stats that I would look at for this game that maybe tilt things just a little bit. It's the 3-point percentage for both teams is what we're going to look at. So Miami in their last 11 is 5-0 when they shoot 40% or better from 3-point range. And they're 0-6 when they shoot under 40% from 3-point range in the last 11. Indiana allows 36% from 3-point shooting away from home. They've only allowed 40 or more in 1 out of the last 5 and 4 out of the last 10. So they're not allowing it on an incredibly consistent basis. And 40 is definitely more than what the Heat are averaging. So I wouldn't put the chances of the Heat hitting that super high, certainly not impossible. Indiana, on the other side, the 3-point percentage is big for them as well. So when they're over 34, they tend to score much better and they tend to win. Miami's allowed over 34% in 7 out of the 11 games without Butler and Adebayo, and they allow 36.4% playing at home. Indiana, though, in 3 straight games has been under 30% from 3-point range. Only 3 out of 10 have been over 34. So they've been shooting the 3 like shit. And the question tonight is whether they can turn that around and have a better 3-point shooting game. Happy Tasty Tuesday to you, Isaac, as well. Thank you. These 2 teams have played twice this year already. They played December 3rd, and Miami won 113-104 in Indiana, and then Indiana won 102-91, also in Indiana. So both teams won by 11 points when they won. The trends here, there are some trends toward the under, if it's going to lean one way or the other, and pretty much 50-50 on the spread trends. So here's the thing with this game, and we're going to run into this more and more, but with all these people out, with Hero just coming back, so we don't really know if he's going to be shooting the ball well or not, with Indiana shooting so poorly in the last few games, but kind of okay before that, I just don't think there's a lot that you can trust here. Indiana could explode here. I think if I had to lean one way or the other, I would lean toward Indiana just because they have the stronger roster at this point, and it looks like Brogdon should be back in this game. But it's a tough spot to actually make a bet on anything or make a serious pick because there's so much up in the air. And we're going to see that with a few of these other games too, unfortunately. But that's kind of the stuff I see in this game. And again, hopefully any of that could help you if you already have a leaning one way or the other. Next game up is the Pistons and the Knicks, 2 teams that suck, but they're playing each other, and we can still place bets on it. So let's talk about it. Detroit doesn't really have – they have Grant Olynyk out like they have. No other news besides that. In their last 5 away from home, they did score 113 in their last away game, gave up 122, but they've been around 100, a little bit either side of 100 in the other games. They also, one of the trend things I found that was big for them is they're 0-4 against the spread after a win, something they don't do very much. So there's only 4 games to have as a sample size, but they did win their last game against the Heat, 100-90, And so they're 0-4 against the spread after that happens. But they're playing a team that's also pretty bad right now in the Knicks. The Knicks are only 4-11 against the spread at home, and they will be at home here. They're 2-8 in their last 10 games, so they've been playing terrible. Their last 5 at home, they've been all over the place in terms of scoring. They've been down at 97 and 99, but also up at 115 and 112 a couple times. So how do you gauge how a team's going to score or play when they're that up and down? I think it's tough to do. Now, one of the things that we do have here is the Knicks have had a lot of people out, and it looks like a lot of them are coming back for this game. So Barrett, Grimes, Knox, Toppin, all probable now. Rose is still a game time decision, and Quickly is out. But so it looks like the Knicks will be getting a lot of reinforcements. But this is where I want to go back again to these guys have been out. The first game they come back, I mean, long term, it absolutely helps them. But does it help them the first game back? And I think that's a tough question to answer. In terms of stats here, a big one for New York is their field goal percentage being 47% or better. They're 6-2 when that happens, but they've only hit it twice since the second week of the season. When you look at why the Knicks have been struggling, I think this is a big piece of the puzzle, that they just can't shoot the ball. And so they did hit this 2 games ago. That was one of their wins. And so they do have a recent time where they hit 47% or better. Doesn't happen a lot. One of the other things I was looking at here was potentially a team total over for the Knicks. When they hit that 47%, they've scored 116, 121, 115, 110, 123. I won't do them all, but it's all like 110 and up. So they've scored pretty well if they can shoot the ball like that. Detroit has allowed 47% or better shooting in 3 out of 5 and 7 out of 10, and they average 48.2% away from home. So I mean, if the Knicks are going to shoot 47% or better, this is a good spot to do it in playing against Detroit. I'm not saying I totally trust it. This is actually a game I'm still wrestling with, but I do think that's something to watch and something the Knicks theoretically could hit. On the other side, Detroit's scoring, they struggle to score. They've only been over 108 of their last 10 games. And they're averaging 103.7. So it's like that most recent game where they scored 113. When they went over at 100, they did it by quite a bit, but they don't do it a lot. They have been over 40% from the field in 8 out of 10, and the Knicks have allowed over 44 in 4 out of 5 and 9 out of 10. And then over 33% three-point percentage in 5 out of 10, but in 3 straight, Detroit has been under 29% from three-point range. Just horrific. And so I don't think that we can count on them to shoot the ball well, even though the Knicks don't defend the three-point shot well. So it's kind of like, what's going to prevail, the Knicks' terrible defense or the Pistons' horrible shooting? Isaac asking the question, is Jeremy Grant being out a big blow to the Pistons defense? Yeah, it is. If you go look, he is definitely more of a factor on defense than on offense. The issue that I have, though, is that the Knicks are just so inconsistent and bad overall. Also asking how I feel about Saddiq Bey points in this game. I will just say, like, Saddiq Bey scored a lot in the last game. He can get hot and he can score a ton, and the Knicks do allow a lot from three-point range. So if you're a player prop guy and you have a lean on that, I think it's a good spot for a three-point shooter against the Knicks, and that's what Saddiq Bey is. But I also want to give the caveat that I don't spend nearly as much time on player props. So there could be other info there that I'm not seeing. But if that's something you're seeing that you like, I do think situationally it makes sense to me. So a couple other things here. Detroit, until that last game, was on a 14-game losing streak, and they lost by 10 in 8 of those games. So 57% of the time, they lost by 10 or more. And I think the spread here is at 6.5 or 7 now. And so that's certainly not more than the Knicks could potentially cover. When we look at trends, there is a little bit of a trend to the over. And I do think with the bad defense here, I want to pull the trigger on the over, but I am just so scared of the Pistons' terrible defense or terrible offense, and the Knicks at times as well. So against the spread, there's actually a lean toward Detroit in the trends here. The Knicks are 0-5 against the spread in their last 5 at home. And the trends were much stronger, sort of anti-Knicks than they were for anything else. And so when I look at this game from just a breakdown perspective, I would lean Knicks a little bit, but I don't trust it a lot. And then looking at the trends, it leans toward the Pistons. And so that leaves me kind of stuck in the middle on this one. But as some of you have thrown some scenarios out, maybe you have some stuff that you like here, and hopefully some of that info could give you a little bit of a push if you're already headed a certain direction. All right, hopefully a couple of these other games will find a couple better spots. Overall, not as strong of a slate from what I'm seeing anyway, but there are maybe a couple spots. Next game is the Blazers and the Pelicans, two more teams who pretty much suck. The Blazers did win their last game away from home, but they're 3-10 against the spread away from home, and they're 7-10 against the spread on 1 day of rest. Oh, we're getting calls here in that. So tonight, Lillard is a game time decision, and he has been struggling with some soreness. Also, now Nazir Little and Nurkic are both game time decisions. So they weren't even on the injury report this morning, and now they are. If those guys sit out, like even though it's the Pelicans, and I hate to trust them, I don't think that the Blazers have much left if that's the case. Portland averaged 98.2 points per game without Lillard, under 100. The Pelicans don't play a lot of defense. In their last 5, they've given up, they did have a 93-105, but then over 110 in the other 3. So you can't trust the Pelicans a lot, but the Pelicans are on a 2-game winning streak right now. Both of the games were close, but in both of those games, they scored the ball really well. And so I think that's something for us to look at. The Pelicans are the number 5 rebounding team in the league, and Portland's in the bottom half rebounding. If Nurkic is out, that's an even bigger blow on the rebounding. And so I think it could give a lot of second chance points to the Pelicans and keep Portland from getting a lot of second chances on the offensive end. So if Nurkic is out, I think that's a pretty big thing. The Pelicans also have more assists per game. And both of these teams are pretty bad on defense. The Pelicans have a 112.4 defensive rating. Portland is 112.7, but which is third worst in the league. But the crazy thing is their defensive rating is 118.5 away from home. So they've just been horrendous on defense away from home. And I know their rating was a little bit better in the last game where they had Lillard back. But if Lillard and Nurkic are sitting, man, I just don't like it. Roy says, sounds like an over, and that was where I went to, but then the over was higher than I wanted it to be. And so this is a spot where I am wondering about Portland's team total, the Pelicans team total over, especially if all these guys are sitting. But the game over might not be a bad look either. In terms of a key stat here for me, it's the Pelicans' three-point shooting. You can see in the NBA today how most of these games, it's 1 or 2 teams, their three-point shooting, what really matters. So when they shoot 35% or better, they're 9-4. And they've gone over 35 in 4 of their last 5 and 7 of their last 10. So that's where I say the Pelicans have been shooting it better here recently. And it's hard because they're going to be inconsistent. The Pelicans are going to have games where they can't score at all, but it seems like they're in a little bit of an offensive groove right now. And so I like that for them. In those games where they shot 35% or better, they averaged 109.5 points per game. 53% of the time they were over 110, and 80% of the time they were over 100. Portland does allow teams to shoot 37.9% from three-point range away from home. So, to be 3 points over that 35 is pretty significant. So, yeah, you can definitely hear here that I do have some interest in the Pelicans. I think they should be able to score. The thing for me is if Nurkic and Lillard are out, I feel that really strongly. If they're in, it feels a little bit more dicey. But because I think the Pelicans are -2.5 right now, always hard to fade Lillard that much. But if he's hurting too, you just wonder if he'll be fully effective or not. So I do have a little bit of a lean toward the Pelicans here, certainly on the money line, maybe against the spread. And then I do have a lean toward the over, and I do have a lean toward the over on the Pelicans points. I haven't made decisions about actually betting any of those things yet. In the trends, there is a little bit of a lean toward the over as well, which is encouraging to me. It's about 2-1 in terms of the trends that I look at. And then it's about 50-50 on the spread, so not much to say there. So maybe a couple bit better spots in this game than there were in the first 2, at least from my perspective. Next game is the Timberwolves and the Mavericks, and this is another game, just triage for both teams in terms of who's going to be able to play. For Minnesota, Edwards, Vanderbilt, Beverly, and Prince are all out. For Dallas, KP is a game-time decision, which I think is a pretty big deal. Doncic, Cauley-Stein, Bullock, Kleber, all out. And so this is a game with both teams having a lot of people out that they would normally have. And this is one of those situations where I think it makes it extremely difficult to cap, because a lot of the numbers that you look at both for recent form and on the season just may not hold true, because the way that these teams function is going to be a little bit different. I think for Minnesota, Jared Vanderbilt being out is pretty massive. It's only a 1-game sample, so I don't really feel like there's any point in sharing the numbers in terms of when he's out. But he's been huge for them on both offense and defense lately, a lot of usage. So I think him being out is going to be a big deal. In terms of other people that are out, this is based purely on the numbers. So I'm not saying that either team is like better or worse with these guys, but I'm just going to tell you straight up what the numbers say. Minnesota's no worse with Anthony Edwards out by the numbers. Offensive, defensive, just pretty much the same. They're 7 worse on defensive rating without Beverly. So he does make, and that makes sense, right? You'd think he would make a difference on the defensive side of the ball. And they're actually slightly better with Taurean Prince out. On the other side, Dallas is actually slightly better by the numbers without Luka than they are with him. We've talked about that a little bit before, but overall, that's what the numbers say. They're slightly better on defense, but worse on offense without Kleber. And the same is true. Slightly better on defense, but worse on offense without Bullock. No difference for Willie Cauley-Stein. But then here's the big one. So they're 12 points worse in offensive rating without Porzingis. They're 2 points better on defense without him. But huge difference on offense. And I think here, if all these guys are out, and then if Porzingis is out, what they're left with is Brunson and Hardaway, basically, to be able to score for Dallas. Minnesota, on the other side of the ball, they still have Karl Anthony Towns, who I think Dallas won't have a lot left inside to contend with him, and I think he could have a pretty strong game here. And then I've talked before about how much I think it matters when D'Angelo Russell plays, regardless of what the numbers say. It's mattered for their outcomes. And so I think that what Minnesota would be left with would be a little bit better than what Dallas would be left with if Porzingis doesn't play. So I did look at both of the team totals here. They're both 107.5, but the hard thing here is that if Porzingis is out, Dallas is potentially even a little bit better on defense, but worse on offense. So maybe that pushes you toward looking at an under, but then Minnesota's gone over this number in 9 out of their last 15. And so the team totals here seem a little shaky. You go to the trends, over and under trends that I look at, it was exactly 50-50. And then in terms of the against the spread trends, it was 80-20 for Minnesota. So pretty strong lean toward Minnesota against the spread. The question that we have to just ask, though, is can we still make much of those trends with these dramatically different rosters than what we would normally see? I'll say for me, I think if Porzingis sits out, I do have a lean toward the Timberwolves. The question would be how much the line moves and what I could get it at. But I think the Timberwolves are in a decent spot if Porzingis isn't playing. If he does, it feels like more of a toss-up to me where I wouldn't have as much interest in betting it. So that's what I've got on Minnesota and Dallas. And that moves us on to our last game of the day, which is the Suns and the Lakers. The Suns are pretty healthy. They don't have any of their key pieces out. The Lakers are not quite the same. So Anthony Davis is still out, but then Bazemore, Bradley, Monk, and Reeves are all out. Those guys are all ancillary players except for Anthony Davis. But again, the Lakers usually need a little bit of help on the wing. And I think all those guys being out just gives them fewer options. Like if Ellington doesn't get it going or something, then where are they going to turn once that's the case? Phoenix has just been phenomenal when they're healthy this year. I mean, looking back over their game log today, it's crazy the winning streaks that they've been on, their offensive and defensive rating in the league, both near the top. They've dominated teams a lot of the time when everybody's healthy. They have Booker back now. They have Ayton healthy. With the Lakers lineup out there tonight, I mean, they're going to throw DeAndre Jordan and maybe Dwight Howard. Yeah, exactly, Roy. That's exactly what I was just saying. He said DeAndre Jordan will get eaten by Ayton, and I feel pretty much the same way. Like I wrote here in my notes, nothing for the Lakers to do about Ayton. And so I think it ends up being a really good matchup for Phoenix. I do think LeBron can still, at his age, still show up and kind of dominate a game. He still has the tools to do that. And so it's something to just be aware of or be careful of. And here's the other crazy thing, which I think I've said before, but by the numbers, the Lakers are actually better in offensive rating and defensive rating without Anthony Davis this year. So make of that what you will, and maybe it won't stay that way, but I'm not sure it kills them for him to be out. In terms of any key numbers here, one is Phoenix's rebounds. The Lakers allow 46.1 at home and have allowed over 47 in 5 of 6. And I think that that's going to be even more the case. Anthony Davis is their leading rebounder with 9.9, and now he's out. And so, again, this just cuts down on second chance points for the Lakers and increases second chance points for Phoenix. And I think that's something that isn't going to be good for the Lakers tonight. Phoenix has won 3 of their last 4 versus the Lakers, and their margin of victory in those 3 wins was 10, 17, and 10. So it's been double digits in all 3 of the games that they've won. In terms of the trends, slight lean toward the under here. Again, this one's close, so I don't necessarily make too much of that one. But there is a strong anti-Laker lean in the trends today. The trends that I look at that felt like they matter at all to me, it was 11-3 against the Lakers for the Suns. So I think the fact that looking at the matchups, looking at health, looking at numbers, offensive, defensive strength, and matchups, and thinking that Phoenix is a side here, and then seeing that strong of a lean in the trends, this is probably the strongest spot for me on the slate overall. I think the numbers come down to Phoenix -6.5, which is not terrible. Now, I do think this is another game where what are the chances that Phoenix gets out to a 5+ point lead and never relinquishes it the whole game? I don't know. I mean, I would say there's a 30-40%, maybe even 50% chance that happens. But if there's even a 50% chance the Lakers ever hold a lead in this game, you could also look and try to get this more at like -4.5, -3.5 live. So that's something that I will potentially be looking here as well. The other thing that I'm going to consider is the Lakers team total under. It's at 108.5. And if you go back and look at their scoring, it just hasn't been very strong lately. And I think Anthony Davis, I don't know, he gives them another offensive weapon, even though the numbers don't say that much about him. But Phoenix's defense with Ayton has been pretty filthy. And so I think the Lakers could definitely struggle to score points in this game. So that's the slate for today. Appreciate you guys. I love the interaction in the chat, man. It's so much more fun than me just sitting here and talking the whole time. So appreciate you guys. We're going to try to get some winners today. I'm guessing that my number of bets will probably be a little bit lower than they normally are today because the spots are a little bit tough. But hey, I want to get back green today and get on that positive trajectory for the rest of the week. So let's try to do that today. Guys, I appreciate the love in the chat. It is a lot of work, but I enjoy it, and I'm thankful if any of it can help you guys. So again, at NBA Attack on Twitter, give me a like on the video, and I will see you guys on Twitter the rest of the day. All right? Have a good one.